Christmas wasn't like how it was in the movies at our house. No glowing lights, no shiny ribbons around gifts, and no Christmas tree glowing in the corner. I didn't expect much from Dad anymore. The attic kept the decorations hidden, forgotten under layers of dust, while he sagged in his chair with a bottle in hand, staring at the TV or out the window like something out there owed him answers. I was 9 now, old enough to stop asking questions, but not old enough to stop wishing things could be different. Mom was never here. Dad never spoke of her except when the drink loosened his tongue, and then it was just fragments. If it weren't for you, he'd mutter, or she'd still be here if... The sentence always trailed off, but I understood. It was my fault. I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't even know if I could. But this year, I thought maybe, just maybe, I could make Christmas special. I didn't want toys or candy or anything fancy. I just wanted someone to talk to. Someone like Frosty the Snowman. I wrote the letter to Santa carefully, my handwriting slow and neat. I asked for Frosty to come to life, not just as a decoration in the yard, but as a real friend. Someone who would laugh and play with me. Someone who wouldn't look at me the way Dad did. Dear Santa, I wrote, I don't need presents or candy. All I want is Frosty the Snowman to be real. I don't have anyone else to talk to. I signed my name at the bottom and folded the letter neatly. After dinner, I slid it across the table to Dad. He picked it up without looking at me, his eyes glassy and unfocused. What's this? He asked, his voice thick with whatever he'd been drinking. It's for Santa, I said. Can you send it for me? He opened it, read it quickly, and snorted. Santa, he muttered, crumpling the paper in one hand. Grow up, kid. The letter disappeared into the trash, buried under empty beer cans and takeout containers. I stared at the trash can, my chest tight, but I didn't cry. Crying wouldn't change anything. That night, I sat at the window watching the snow cover the world in white silence. The icy air crept through the glass, numbing my forehead where I leaned. I closed my eyes and made a wish, just like in the stories. I wish Frosty was real, I whispered. I wish I had a friend. The house was silent except for the heater's steady whir, almost like a far-off lullaby. Dad was snoring downstairs, the TV casting shadows in the dark. I drifted off, my head resting against the cold window. A noise pulled me out of sleep, strange and too clear to ignore. At first I thought it was the wind, but then I heard it again, a soft scraping sound like something clawing at brick. My chest thudded as I sat up, listening. The noise was coming from the chimney. I crept downstairs, careful not to make the old wooden steps creak. The living room was dim, the glow of the TV casting pale light over Dad slumped in his chair, an empty bottle leaning against his foot. That's when I saw it. A stocking. It hung above the fireplace, bright red and new, with my name stitched in a white thread. I didn't know where it had come from. There hadn't been any decorations before. My hands shook as I pulled it down and reached inside. The paper inside was thick, its edges slightly crumpled. Be kind to him, it said, and below that were instructions on how to build a snowman. The first few rules were simple. Roll 3 snowballs and stack them. Use buttons for the eyes and a scarf for the neck. I smiled. It was just like the song. Then the rules got stranger. Add a drop of blood from someone who loves you. Give the snowman a heart, a real one. I stared at the paper, my smile fading. The words didn't make sense, but they didn't frighten me either. Frosty needed me to build him. If I followed the rules, he would come to life. He'd be my friend. I didn't hesitate. I threw on my coat and boots, stepping into the freezing night. The snow clung to my gloves, thick and damp, as I rolled the first ball, then the second, then the third. I stacked them slowly, pressing them together to keep them steady. For the eyes, I dug through the junk drawer and found two mismatched buttons, dusty but perfect. For the scarf, I grabbed one of Dad's old ones from the back of the closet. I doubted he'd notice it was gone. The blood part was harder. I jabbed Dad's finger with a sewing needle, a small bead of red blooming on the tip. It was tiny, but it was enough. Dad was too drunk to even feel it. I pressed it onto Frosty's face, right where his mouth would be. The last step, the heart, was the hardest. All I had was Birdie, my parakeet. The only life in this house besides Dad and me. His feathers were soft, his little heartbeat trembling against my hand. I didn't want to do it, but I had to. Frosty needed me. I will always remember you, Birdie. Thank you for being my first friend. When it was done, I buried Birdie's heart in Frosty's chest and stepped back, waiting for something to happen. Each exhale turned into a small ghost disappearing in the air, and the quiet pressed in. No sound besides my cold breath. Nothing happened. Dad stumbled outside a little later, squinting at the snowman. "What's this?" he muttered. "Frosty," I said. "Where's the damn bird?" "He flew away," I lied. "Figures," he said. "You can't even keep a stupid bird." He went back inside, slamming the door behind him. I stayed outside, staring at Frosty. The buttons didn't look right, almost like they were watching me. His mouth, a crooked line I'd made, seemed to twist slightly in the dark. I was devastated. Did I really just sacrifice my only friend for this? What was I even thinking? The next night was freezing, cold enough to frost the windows even with the heater running. I stayed up late again, sitting by the window staring at Frosty. He hadn't moved since I'd built him, but something about him felt wrong. Maybe it was his smile. When I shaped it, it had been a small curve in the snow. Now it looked bigger, like it had stretched on its own, curling up at the edges in a way that made me nervous. I told myself I was imagining it. Snow didn't grow and snowmen didn't smile, but I couldn't stop watching. That's when I saw it. It started small, a twitch, like something under his snow was wriggling around. Then Frosty moved. He didn't move like people do. He didn't step. He just jerked forward like something was yanking him along. The snow under him didn't even leave marks. It just shifted, like he was part of it. I couldn't move, just staring at him. He stopped at the edge of the yard, his head tilting a little, and his button eyes glowed faint blue in the dark. Then he turned toward the Johnsons' house. The Johnsons lived 2 doors down. Mr. Johnson wasn't nice, always yelling at kids for playing near his yard or at cars for driving too fast. But Mrs. Johnson, she was sweet. She always had cookies for the kids, even if her husband complained about it. Frosty slid toward their house, his movements getting faster, like he was skating without touching the ground. I leaned closer to the window, my breath fogging up the glass. He stopped outside their door, tilting his head again like he was listening. Then he moved. It was so quick, I barely caught it. 1 second he was outside, the next he was inside. No sound, no breaking glass or creaking door, just gone, like he melted through the wall. A scream came out of nowhere, high and sharp, making my stomach flip. Then another, lower and louder, and then there was this wet, crunching noise. I gripped the windowsill, frozen. My brain was yelling at me to do something, to wake up Dad, but I couldn't. I couldn't even breathe. When the sound stopped, the quiet was worse. The next morning, there was a new snowman in the Johnsons' yard. At first, I thought it was just a regular snowman, maybe one they'd built the day before. But as I looked closer, my stomach turned. It wasn't normal. One button eye was bigger than the other, and its mouth gaped wide, filled with black rocks that looked sharp. The snow was clumped together weirdly, like it wasn't packed by hands. And one of the arms was too long, bent in a way that made me look away. Dad didn't notice. He was too busy complaining about the heater and nursing his hangover. I thought about telling him about Frosty and everything I saw, but I knew he wouldn't listen. That night, Frosty came back. It started with a noise, a crunch in the snow, slow and steady. I sat up in bed, my chest tight. The sound was coming from the yard. I crept to the window and squinted through the frost to see better. Frosty was there, standing in the middle of the yard, but he wasn't alone. There were 3 of them now. The other snowmen were like the one in the Johnsons' yard, lumpy and wrong. One was missing an eye, replaced with something round and shiny that caught the moonlight. The other had stick arms, but they were thick and curved, like they didn't belong there. Frosty's head turned toward me. His glowing button eyes stared right at me, and his grin got bigger, curling up like it was alive. I stumbled back from the window, my chest squeezing tight like I couldn't breathe. "Dad!" I yelled, running into the hallway. "Dad, wake up!" He was already awake, standing at the top of the stairs with a bottle in one hand and his unlit cigarette in the other. "What now?" he muttered, his voice rough. "Frosty," I said, pointing toward the window. He's in the yard, and there are others." Dad cut me off with a groan. "It's the middle of the night," he said, rubbing his eyes. "Go back to bed." "But Dad—" "Enough!" he snapped, his voice echoing through the hall. "Get to bed, and quit making stuff up." I didn't argue. I didn't know how to explain what I'd seen. Later that night, I heard the sound again. This time, it wasn't coming from the yard. It was coming from the window. The noise wasn't just scratching anymore. It was constant, steady. I froze in my bed, staring at the frosted glass. The blue glow from Frosty's eyes came through, casting a pale light into the room. The scratching stopped, but then there was a muffled thump from outside. My stomach twisted as I realized Frosty wasn't alone. The lumpy, weird-looking snowmen were moving now, dragging themselves across the yard. Their movements were slow and jerky, like they didn't know how to work their bodies. One fell apart halfway across the lawn, breaking open to a pile of snow and something worse. I couldn't see it at first, but the smell hit me. It was sharp and rotten, like spoiled meat. My hands shook as I crept closer to the window, trying to see what spilled out of the broken snowman. There was an arm. Human. The skin was pale and bluish. The fingers bent in ways that didn't look right. I gagged, stumbling back, but I couldn't look away. Bits of bone and flesh stuck out from the snow, frozen solid. It wasn't just a snowman, it was Mrs. Johnson. I clamped my hand over my mouth, tears burning my eyes. Frosty didn't move, but his glowing eyes seemed to get brighter and his grin stretched wider, like he knew I'd figured it out. I scrambled out of my room, running down the hall to Dad's door. "Dad!" I yelled, pounding on it. "What the hell do you want?" he slurred, throwing it open. His eyes were bloodshot, and he smelled like beer. "They're outside," I said, almost screaming. "Frosty and the others. They're moving, and there's—" Dad cut me off with a growl. "Enough with this Frosty crap." He grabbed my arm and dragged me to the living room window. "Look," he said, yanking the curtain open. I flinched, sure I'd see Frosty pressed up against the glass, but the yard was empty. The snow looked smooth, untouched, like nothing had been there at all. "They were here," I whispered. I swear they were here. Dad stared at me, his face tight and angry. "Go to bed," he said through his teeth. "Now." I didn't argue. I knew he wouldn't believe me. I curled up on the couch instead, staring at the yard through a crack in the curtains. I must have fallen asleep because the next thing I knew, Dad was shaking me awake. "What the hell happened out here?" he snapped. I sat up, blinking at the moonlight streaming through the window. My stomach dropped when I saw the yard. The snow was a mess, churned up, with streaks of dark red leading from the Johnsons' house to ours. There was another snowman now. It was bigger than the others, taller and more messed up. The body was bulging, like something inside was trying to push out. One of the arms looked like it had been ripped off something alive. Dad didn't notice the details. He was too busy staring at the blood. "What the hell did you do?" he shouted, spinning toward me. "It wasn't me," I cried, backing away. "It was Frosty. I told you he—" "Enough," Dad barked, grabbing my shoulders. "Stop lying and tell me what happened." I didn't know how to explain it. How could I tell him a snowman had come to life and stuffed Mrs. Johnson into one of its creepy, lumpy friends? Dad let me go, rubbing his forehead. "We're going to the police," he said. But Frosty had other plans. We didn't make it to the car. As soon as we stepped outside, Frosty was there, gliding across the snow fast. His glowing eyes burned cold, and his grin stretched even wider with every inch he got closer. "Get back inside," Dad shouted, shoving me toward the house. But Frosty was too fast. He lunged, his stick hands swiping sharp through the air. I ducked, but Dad wasn't so lucky. Frosty's claws raked across his leg, cutting deep and turning his skin blue and frozen. Dad yelled, falling into the snow. I grabbed his arm, trying to help him up, but Frosty wasn't stopping. "Run!" Dad yelled, shoving me toward the car. I didn't want to leave him, but I didn't have a choice. I ran to the car, fumbling with the door as Frosty's glowing eyes locked on me. Dad dragged himself behind me, pulling his hurt leg, and managed to climb into the driver's seat. The engine roared to life, and he hit the gas, slamming straight into Frosty. Frosty broke apart, pieces of snow and sticks flying everywhere. But it didn't last. The pieces twitched and started sliding back together. His grin reappeared first, then the glowing blue eyes. "We can't stop him," I whispered, my words shaking like my hands. Dad clenched his jaw and threw the car into reverse, slamming into Frosty again. He kept hitting him over and over. It didn't matter. Every time Frosty broke apart, he just pulled himself back together, stronger than before. After what must have been 100 times of running Frosty over, Dad said, "I've had enough of this shit," and grabbed a baseball bat from the back seat. The car skidded to a stop, the engine sputtering as Dad and I stared at Frosty's shattered remains. Chunks of snow and ice were all over the yard, shining under the moonlight. For a moment, neither of us moved. My chest was pounding so hard it hurt, and the cold air stung my lungs. "Is it over?" I whispered, clutching the dashboard with shaking hands. Dad didn't answer. He was breathing hard, his leg bleeding through the torn fabric of his jeans. He reached for the door handle, muttering, "Stay here." He stepped out into the snow, limping toward the pile of Frosty's remains. I wanted to yell at him to come back, to get back in the car where it was safe, but the words wouldn't come out. I couldn't take my eyes off the pieces of Frosty scattered in the snow. Then they started to move. At first it was just a twitch, a branch shifting slightly, and the sound of snow sliding. But then the pieces began pulling themselves back together, sliding across the ground like they couldn't stay apart. "Dad!" I screamed, my voice cracking. He turned just as Frosty's head reformed, his jagged grin snapping back into place. Frosty lunged forward, moving faster than I thought possible. His clawed hand grabbed Dad's ankle, yanking him down to the snow. "No!" I threw open the car door, running toward them as Frosty pinned Dad to the ground. "Stay back!" Dad shouted, his voice rough and strained. He swung the bat, smashing it into Frosty's head, but it didn't even slow him down. Frosty's glowing blue eyes burned brighter, and his grin stretched wider, twisted and wrong. I froze in the middle of the yard, unable to breathe. Frosty's claws dug into Dad's shoulders, frost spreading fast over his arms, turning his skin blue and stiff. Dad screamed, the sound cutting through the night, raw and desperate. That's when I saw it, the sun. The first light of day was spreading across the yard, warm and golden. Frosty's movement slowed, his glowing eyes flickering like a dying flashlight. His twisted mouth opened in a silent scream as the sunlight started to melt him, his edges dripping into slush. "Let him go!" I yelled, grabbing the bat Dad had dropped. I swung as hard as I could, hitting Frosty in the chest. Snow and ice exploded into the air, and Frosty staggered back, letting Dad go. "Get up!" I cried, grabbing Dad's arm. He was heavy, his legs barely working, but together we stumbled back to the car. Frosty wasn't done. Even as the sunlight melted him, he kept coming, crawling through the snow with his claws. His body was falling apart, chunks of ice and snow dropping off with every step, but his grin never went away. The other snowmen in the yard started to collapse, their bodies crumbling as the sun rose higher. One by one they fell apart, showing what was stuffed inside them, twisted arms, broken legs, and faces I recognized. It was the neighbors. But Frosty wouldn't stop. He lunged at us, his body falling apart, as I swung the bat again. This time his head shattered, the glowing buttons flying into the snow and landing far apart. His body fell into a pile of slush and bloody snow. For a moment, everything was still. Dad and I just stood there, staring at the mess. The yard was a wreck, red-streaked snow, broken sticks, and pieces of Frosty scattered everywhere. It looked like a nightmare spread out for everyone to see in the morning light. I think it's over, Dad muttered, his voice barely there. But when Frosty melted, something didn't go away. His grin. That god-awful nightmare of a smile stayed in the snow, black and twisted, like it had been burned there. The buttons that were his eyes lay in the middle of the yard, dark and empty, but somehow still staring. The police showed up an hour later. By then the sun was high, and most of the snow was gone. All the awful stuff that had been inside the snowmen was melted into nothing. Dad told them everything. About Frosty, the snowmen, the bodies. But the cops didn't believe him. They said the blood in the yard, the Johnson's house, and on the neighbors was all his. "Frosty," one of the officers said, rolling his eyes. "A snowman killed these people?" "Yeah, right." They arrested Dad, dragging him off in handcuffs while he shouted for them to check the yard, to look for the buttons, the grin. But there was nothing left. I was sent to a foster home. No one asked me about Frosty. They called it a tragedy and said I was lucky to be alive. But I don't feel lucky. Although Dad was mean, he didn't deserve this. He wasn't the one who did this, but no one believed me. They just figured I was too traumatized. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, I wake up to the sound of snow crunching outside my window. And sometimes, when I look outside, I see two buttons and that grin watching me from the yard.